Good evening, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the article that I wrote, which was Michael P. Winship's 2006 article, Godly Republicanism and the Origins of the Massachusetts Polity, which explored the deep interrelationship between religion and republicanism in the formation of the Massachusetts Bay Colony's political structure. Now, he argues that the Puritan settlers developed a unique form of, quote, godly republicanism, in which civil governance was explicitly grounded in religious principles and church polity. In drawing on the theological framework of Reformed Protestantism, particularly covenant theology, Winship explains how the Puritans conceived their community as a collective covenant with God, requiring active moral vigilance and mutual accountability. The result was a political order that rejected both hierarchical monarchy and radical democratic egalitarianism in favor of a godly commonwealth ruled by virtuous, pious men. Winship situates this synthesis of faith and political governance as a foundational moment in the American Republican tradition, one in which liberty, civic responsibility, and moral order are deeply interwoven through a religious lens. So the Massachusetts Bay Polity was a deliberate fusion of congregational ecclesiology and Republican civil ideas. Puritan political theory was not simply a reaction against the English monarchy, but a proactive effort to instantiate biblical principles in government. The founders of Massachusetts saw their political community as a sacred trust, bound to preserve liberty not merely as a civic virtue, but as a condition for religious flourishing. And church membership and moral standing were prerequisites for full political participation and blending spiritual and civil dimensions of Republican virtue. So all this helps explain why Massachusetts was a leader in both colonial and early state legislation, linking civic order to religious morality through things like sumptuary laws. These laws, for example, regulated personal behavior, dress, and consumption, often to reflect religious values and enforce social hierarchy consistent with a godly commonwealth. Some notable examples of these included the 1634 Massachusetts sumptuary law on apparel, which forbade anyone from wearing, quote, gold or silver lace or gold or silver buttons or any bone lace above 2 shillings per yard or silk hoods or scarves. And there were a series of laws passed in the ensuing decades in the middle of the 17th century that regulated things like hair and fashion. For example, men were fined for growing their hair long, a practice which during the period of the English Civil War was associated with cavaliers or other ungodly influences. And women could be reprimanded for extravagant ribbons or, quote, immodest styles. And then at that same time, Massachusetts also banned certain holidays seen as remnants of Catholic or Anglican traditions, including Christmas. In 1659, the General Court made celebrating Christmas punishable by a fine of 5 shillings. Puritans saw Christmas as a man-made festival with pagan origins, not ordained by Scripture and often associated with disorderly revelry. Its banning was part of a broader moral disciplining of the community. Then there were Sunday laws, or blue laws. Massachusetts was a national leader in enforcing Sunday Sabbatarianism. Under both colonial and state law until well into the 19th century, it was illegal to work or sell goods, travel for non-essential reasons, or engage in recreational activities like sports, plays, shows. These laws were enforced not only through fines, that is through the state, but also through public shaming or church discipline. Likewise, Massachusetts was one of the last states to retain blasphemy statutes on the books. For example, under an 1782 law, still enforced well into the 19th century, blaspheming the name of God or the Scriptures could result in imprisonment or fines. These laws demonstrate the deep imprint of that godly republicanism that Winship explores on both civic identity and public morality in Massachusetts. The colony and later the state saw no clear separation between the health of the Commonwealth and the virtue of its citizens, a classical Republican and Christian humanist concept filtered through Puritan theology. Even after disestablishment in the 1830s, these ideals continued to shape public expectations. Here again, with regard to the establishment of a religion in the state of Massachusetts, as Mark David Hall, David L. Dreifenbach, and so many others have shown, contrary to the liberal secularism that predominates mainstream academic narratives of the period of the United States' founding, virtually all of the founders were ardent, believing, and practicing Christians of one kind or another. It was only natural then that they sought to create states that embodied these values, some more so than others, Massachusetts being admittedly on the extreme end of that, not establishing until 1833, one of the last states to do so. And importantly, when it did give way, it did so not in the face of some secular onslaught, but in the face of demands for more religious pluralism by other Christian groups and an end to the taxation of those Christian groups like Methodists in support of the state church. None of what occurred in Massachusetts should be surprising, nor is it even in contrast or in contradiction with the understanding of republicanism espoused by the least Christian of the founders, people like Thomas Jefferson, who recognized in the ancients, such as Aristotle, that virtue and its cultivation are critical to the realization of the politeia, that is self-government by the many, good self-government by the many. And that therefore the polity in question, if it has proper understanding of itself, that is, if its leaders and members are wise, should make a state policy of the cultivation of virtue for the pursuit of the common good through the pursuit of virtue. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to talking to you next week.